All right, good morning. We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. We are really excited to be able to share a new toolkit with you. I'm joined today by two dear colleagues, Leslie Barnard and Rowhani Rahbar. They'll introduce themselves in more detail before they start their sections of the presentation. My name is Emmy Betz. I am a professor of emergency medicine here at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, and I lead the Firearm Injury Prevention Initiative that's here on campus. A couple of notes for today. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so please put any questions you might have into the Q&A box. We would also love to know who's joining us. So if you feel comfortable, please in the chat box, just share maybe who you are, if you're part of an organization, what state you're in. We'd love to see the range of folks who are joining us today. We will be recording this webinar, or we are recording this webinar, and it will be posted on the web. We'll share that link with you all probably by tomorrow so that you can watch it again if you want, or share it with others who weren't able to be here today. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share some slides and let's jump in. Okay, can I get a thumbs up? Are you seeing the correct view? Okay, phew, thanks. So I'm going to start things off and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. So we're excited today on behalf of the University of Colorado and our colleagues at the University of Washington to share with you the results of this project, specifically a new toolkit for how to make statewide firearm storage maps. We are happy to be here presenting today on behalf of our larger teams from both institutions. Also want to say a huge thank you to our advisory board for this project, who helped us along the way, as well as providing content review for the toolkit itself. The work we'll be talking about was funded from through a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health. But what we're talking about today, and certainly views and opinions, are our own and not those of the NIH or of any of our employers. Okay, so I'm going to do this a little bit backwards. One of the take-home slides, these are a few of the resources we are really excited to share with you all today. So the first is a link to a webinar that we did back in March, which was more about some of the results about what we were finding about the concept of storage, what retailers and ranges and so forth really thought about. And what were some of the challenges there. So if you're interested, we encourage you to go back and watch that at some point if you're still thinking about some of the other kind of larger issues in why we might pursue this kind of storage or this kind of promotion of out-of-home temporary voluntary firearm storage. We've also heard loud and clear that people have lots of questions and they want to share things with each other. So we are going to try to create a Google group specifically for out-of-home storage mapping and map creation. If you're interested, please contact us, or you can send a private chat to Megan McCarthy or any of the panelists, or you can just put your name and email in the chat if you feel comfortable doing that. And we will create that group and then kind of see how it works for folks in terms of having a networking space for people to share best practices, answer questions, and so forth. And then we're really excited to be releasing a toolkit today. It's on our website and at the QR code that's on your screen. We'll put the link in the chat as well. We welcome any suggestions you have back or edits. We know this is an ongoing process, but we hope that it's a useful resource for different organizations, state offices, and so forth, thinking about this concept of temporary voluntary out-of-home storage and creation of online maps to help people find locations. So the toolkit is really the product of a 2-year project that we had, again, with funding from the NIH, but specifically the last part of it, which was when we spoke with states with maps and without maps to hear what were things that they had been thinking about, what were challenges that they faced, how did they go about this process. So this slide shows our 2 study sites, so Colorado and Washington. Both of our states already have maps, and we did incorporate some of the experiences from our own states in creating those. The dark blue states are the states that have at least regional maps or partial regional maps that are publicly available on the web. You can find the links to all of those in the toolkit that we put out. And so we spoke with representatives from each of those mapping groups to hear how they had done it. The light blue states are places that are either in the process of making maps or are thinking about it or thought about it and decided not to. And so we also spoke with folks from those states. Many apologies to any states who we might have missed. We did our best in our own networks, as well as asking the people we interviewed, asking them if they knew of other states or other groups doing this. And so we tried to canvass everybody. This was done last spring. And so we realized we may have missed states. So many apologies if you are in the process of doing this and we didn't talk to you. So throughout this presentation, we want to share some of the quotes that we heard from people in terms of how this process has worked with them. And so the one I want to start with is somebody said, we're all just right now figuring it out as we go. And sort of thinking about if you had kind of prompts for how you do this instead of baptism by fire learning, that'd be fantastic. And so that is our goal with the webinar and with the toolkit that we're releasing is to help share some of the experiences that people have had. So what we're going to, what's in the toolkit and what we're going to talk about today, really there are three big sections. The first is who, in thinking about things like trust and partnerships, who you create these maps with. Then there's the section of how, in terms of outreach. How do you actually find locations? How do you make the map? We're going to talk about that today. And then what, meaning what are some of the things to think about? What are some of the legal concerns? What are other resources available as you're thinking about this process? So we'll start off with getting ready to build a map. And I will say, again, we're starting today with the sort of an assumption that you've already thought about why you might want to do this. Briefly, that's because we know that many people at times might want to store their gun out of their homes, whether it's for someone with suicide risk, a long vacation, renting their house, and so forth. So this is around the concept of temporary, voluntary, out-of-home firearm storage at places like law enforcement agencies or firearm retailers. So when you're getting ready to build a map, the first really key thing to think about is trust, that there has to be a lot of trust in the process and among the partners doing it. So one thing we heard, for example, from someone from a university organization, they were thinking about where to host the map, where should the website live? And this person said, I encountered that pretty often with a university website, people are going to assume, a certain agenda. So one thing to just think about, even if you're calling on behalf of a university or school of public health, in some populations that actually may not have a lot of trust. And so you might think about having a separate website identity or a different organization actually host the site. In other places, it may not be an issue and you may feel like a university site is actually the most trustworthy place to host it. We also heard about trust in terms of who's actually doing the outreach and making the phone calls. One person we spoke with spoke about a student who is a veteran who was doing the phone calls, said, I felt comfortable with him calling because he would know the lingo, even as far as firearm ownership. I don't personally own any firearms. So this was a person acknowledging that it was helpful for their team to have somebody on the project who could call and perhaps more naturally have conversations with retailers about some of these concepts, that it increased the trust perhaps both ways. We also heard from another site that they felt it very important to keep their network with firearm retail locations that were offering storage, to keep that network strong, such that they actually were going to share the website with them before they made it live. So we're going to share the draft map with them, tell them exactly where it's going to be hosted, show them the website first before it gets taken live, just to make sure they're okay with having their information on that site. Another piece of trust was in thinking about how to actually disseminate it to the public and have the public trust what the process was. So one person said, we're trying to find out how we can not only have this map, but how we can advertise the heck out of it in a way that people, again, feel that they can access the service. Because having the service alone, if people don't use it, again, isn't as worthwhile. We want more people to access it. And I think that's really a key point. Just building a map doesn't do anything. It's really about how do you make out-of-home storage a feasible, acceptable option for people to think about. So in terms of finding locations, and there's more details in the toolkit in terms of like how you actually go through this process. For retailers and ranges, most people and what our teams have done is first obtain a list of FFLs or licensed dealers. Also just searching business listings in Google Maps, starting with an initial list, and then typically restricting it to places that have a brick and mortar physical location where they could actually store firearms, because many FFLs may do sales out of their home, and then that wouldn't really be a publicly facing business able to store. For law enforcement agencies, you can similarly search, business or Google search kinds of things for listings, or you can purchase a list from the National Public Safety Information Bureau. We did find some states actually didn't include law enforcement agencies. And so I would just point out, especially if you have a very large state or less resources in terms of creating a map, that's one thing you might think about, is focusing only on retailers and ranges, because in for some communities, those might be the preferred storage locations over law enforcement. Generally, people have done outreach by email, by phone, in some cases in person, just going in to chat with people. And our toolkit includes sample language scripting for phone calls, some of the frequently asked questions, some recommendations for how to have those initial conversations. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Leslie Barnard. She'll introduce herself more and then move on to some of the hows of doing this. Thanks, Leslie.
Thanks, Emmy. Hi, everyone. My name is Leslie Barnard. I am a third-year doctorate of public health student in the epidemiology program. And my work and research focuses on suicide prevention, specifically firearm suicide prevention. So I'm happy to talk with you all about how to build a map once you have your list of law enforcement agencies and retailers and ranges that you want to add. We're going to go over sort of how exactly to add those to an actual map. I'll note I have a demo video that I'm going to show. I'll just note that we used Google Maps. That from the interviews was really the most popular software to use, mostly because of it's really user friendly and it's free. So there are other options to create these maps, but the demo today we're going to show is for Google Maps. Next slide. Ooh, Emmy, I think you have to unmute yourself for us to hear it.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Always technical issues. Okay.
Yeah.
Try to.
All right. So this is a recording about how to create a custom map in Google Maps. As you can see here, I have logged into my Gmail account, and we encourage everyone to sort of create their own Google account for this project, so that you can just coordinate all the out-of-home storage locations. Any questions that are related to this project can all sort of be fed into the same location. So while I'm in my personal account, just because I don't have any maps that I've personally created, so I thought this would be a better way to do the demo. Okay, so after logging into the account project, the account for the project, you're going to go to the My Maps page. So you can actually just literally Google it, Google My Maps, and then this first link is the Google Maps My Maps page. And we're going to go ahead and click Get Started. So like I said, I don't have any maps, so it says no maps are owned by you. And what we're going to do is go to the little hamburger tool and click Create a New Map. And that should bring up a new untitled map that is linked to your personal or your project account. First thing we're going to do is create a new name for this. So for this, I'm going to say test storage map demo, and then demo for webinar. And you can create whatever name and whatever description that you think is appropriate for your particular map, which is great. So after you've created your new map, you're going to start to add storage locations, which sounds like it should be difficult, but it's actually really, really easy. So you can see that there's just this regular, just this regular search bar, like you'd see on any old Google map that is on your phone or on your computer. And what you're going to do is after having your list of storage locations, you can just literally search for them in this bar. So I'm going to use an example of a retailer range that I know in Colorado provides storage. So Bristol Cone Shooting Training Retail Center. So I'm going to click on that. And then what you should do is just double check that the location that you found on Google Maps actually matches the one that you're actually looking for that you want to add to the map. Once you've done that, you can see that this is added. You can navigate to the control panel that you've just added. So this is that control panel. And by clicking on the point, you can change the color in the icon that will be displayed for this particular location. So, so this little paint can right here. So say we want to make all of our retailers and ranges like a bright red or something. And then we can also change the icon, as you can see here. So say we want to make the icon, for example, like a shopping bag to show that that's sort of a place that people can also purchase firearms. There's also tons of additional icons for you to choose from. So you can standardize this based off of other maps that have already been developed, or do it your own way, however you want to go about that. So here you can see this is an actual layer of the map. If you wanted to, you could make this retailer range and separate the types of storage locations that you have. Add another layer here. We can make this law enforcement agencies, and then add different locations depending on each of those layers. Those are, again, just for your personal organization, whatever your personal style is in terms of adding these. There's absolutely no, you don't need to have separate layers if you don't want to. And then you can just go about adding additional locations. For the sake of time, I'm not going to do that here. So we're going to move on to showing you how you can change the base map. So the base map, what you can do is, okay, so if you click the down arrow next to base map, right here, you can actually change the way that these locations are going to be stored. So again, that's our little example of our storage location. So depending on what you think looks best, you can change the base map. This is just the regular Google Maps one, so it might be easiest for folks who are familiar with the program to be able to recognize what they're looking at. If you want to see how this looks in sort of a regular user end map viewer, you can click preview. It'll bring you to a new page like you would see on Google Maps. And you can see exactly how this is going to look in terms of your specific location, all of that stuff. And then you can click out of that when you're done looking at your test. And then all of the changes that you've made won't be automatically saved. So to continue editing your map, you're going to sign back into your maps, and you'll be able to see exactly all the changes that you've made. So like I'll click right out of that, do a new Google search for my maps. While I'm logged into the account that's appropriate, I'll go here and see, get started. The map that I created is still here, automatically saved. So once you've finalized adding all the locations onto your Google map and you're happy with how it looks based off of that preview function, you have to change the permissions from private to public for posting or embedding this map. So if you go to the control panel, this control panel here, and you select share, you can see this is my personal account. So anyone with the link can view. You can change the permissions based off of what sort of stage of the project you're at. So if you wanted to turn on anyone with the link can view. That's a really great testing point to sort of beta check everything with your team after adding your locations, making sure everyone's on the same page. And then you can just directly copy and paste this link to share with your team members, which is a really great function sort of before going officially live. And then once you're ready to post the map, you can go ahead and let others see and find this map on the internet. So then based off of the name of your map or sort of where you decide to post it and embed it on particular websites, people will be able to find this map a little bit more easily. And then I'm not going to turn this on because, again, like I said, this is my personal Gmail account. But if you have a Gmail account that you'd like for folks to be able to reach out to so that they can ask questions and you can answer them, it might be a good idea to turn this function on and let others see your name and photo on this map so they can see exactly who developed it and ask any questions to that Gmail account that you created. And then lastly, this link at the bottom is exactly, you can click this and it'll automatically copy that link. And then you can share it with any collaborators, stakeholders, folks you think might benefit from seeing this map. You can also share the map with specific people by selecting the share to drive function, so the share on drive. And then you can add those particular people's emails to the people that you want to have access to. So yeah, those are just options of how you can share this map. Again, there's a lot of different ways to be able to share it, and so just pick the way that's most appropriate for the stage of development that you're at. And then lastly, I want to talk about how to embed the map into web pages. So if you go back to this main control panel and you go to preview, we'll take a second to hop on. Okay, so this is what the map will look like. Again, with all of your map layers of retailer ranges. If someone wants to just look at a retailer range, or if you have a law enforcement layer here as well, they can select depending on like the end user's personal preference. But yes, to embed it, you go to preview and then you're going to click share and then hit this last option that says embed on my site. And then you can embed this map by copying the HTML and pasting it into the source code for your particular web page. And anyone who is a web designer should be able to really easily add that on there. That's all for developing a map. It's pretty user-friendly. It should be pretty straightforward. But I did want to share this one additional resource that is in, this is all in our toolkit, but it's a step-by-step how to create a custom map in Google Maps that's really, really straightforward, that sort of goes over a lot of the things that I've talked about and has a couple additional functions for anyone who is curious. So I just wanted to share that. Otherwise, yeah, we'll get back to the presentation. Thanks for listening. All right, so this is a recording about how.
Thanks, Emmy. Awesome. So I hope that demo was helpful for everyone. Again, this is being recorded, so all of that will be accessible after this webinar in a couple of days. So you should be able to have access to that link. And again, in our toolkit, we have all of the steps spelled out, so it's pretty easy to follow. As you're working through all of that, if you choose Google Maps, all of that is available to you. Next, I just wanted to talk about maintenance of the map. So once you've actually done all this work up front, finding storage locations, created the map, it's going live, it's really important to keep the maps updated and stay in contact with storage sites to ensure that they're reminded and aware of their participation in the map and that they're able to answer questions if those who are seeking storage have them. However, from the interviews that we did of different states that have maps and are working on maps, the lack of funding with these types of projects makes it really unclear how to best do this. Next slide. Okay, so these are just some quotes that highlight that. So one location said, who's going to make the calls and how is this map going to be updated on a yearly basis or something like that? So those were the questions that we had that we were beginning to talk about, and identifying students or someone who could make the calls, and how do we identify ourselves? So it's really how often should you be calling these storage locations so that they don't get sort of this fatigue of being a participant in this program? And how do you have someone on your staff who's able to actually do those calls and physically update the map, given that there isn't a lot of funding for this? Next quote. We talked about barriers like sustaining it. And so, yeah, we don't have a plan for that either. If you figure it out, let us know. Calling them and saying, is this still accurate information? We can keep you on the can we keep you on the website? It's a simple thing in a sense, but it just takes time. So again, just that time effort of having someone able to call and having a plan for that in terms of what's the most time effective and cost effective way of updating it. We need funds for somebody to have the percentage of their time spent sweeping through FFLs and law enforcement to see if you still want to be on this map. If you're not on the map, do you want to get on the map? And the whys and why nots. So just constantly, because keeping it in people's minds by touching base with them, again, I think it just keeps the product fresh and increases the odds that they'll talk to people about it and direct people to it. So again, just keeping in contact with the storage sites that are, or the sites that are able to provide storage, if they're aware and are made constantly aware that they are on this type of website, this map program, and they do offer storage, they may be more apt to direct people and offer the service to people. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ali.
Great, thank you very much, Leslie. Please let me know if you can't hear my voice well or if there are any glitches in audio or video. I'm Ali Rowhani. I'm a professor in the Department of Epidemiology at the University of Washington School of Public Health. And I study mainly the impact of community-based programs and social policies on firearm injury. And I've had the pleasure of working with Emmy and our colleagues at the University of Colorado on this great NIH-funded study for the past few years now. So what I'm going to talk about as part of this presentation is perhaps the most common theme that comes up when we talk to individuals who want to create a map or who have already created a map in terms of legal concerns, and also provide some answers to those questions and share some resources. Emmy, next one, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, perhaps the most common concerns among potential storage suppliers are issues around liability and legal issues, and that's a very valid concern. And mainly there are two different phases that these concerns come up about. So during storage and after storage. During storage, as you could imagine, one concern is just regulatory compliance when providing storage in accordance with all the state and federal laws and regulations, things like how to log firearms. How should we go about doing that? Or liability for damage or theft of firearms occurring while temporarily stored with the suppliers. So those are some of the concerns that come up during the storage. But there are also concerns about after storage. So you could imagine concerns regarding ability to refuse to return a firearm to an owner if the storage provider is concerned, doesn't believe that they're going to be safe. Legal issues if the owner doesn't retrieve them in a timely manner. And liability upon return of the firearm to someone. If the owner subsequently uses it in a suicide attempt or in a perpetration of a crime, then is there any liability for the supplier who provided them back with the firearm? So these are some of the concerns that come up. The next one, please. And these are some of the quotes, just like the ones that Emmy and Leslie have shown you. I wanted to read some of for you to see. These are some of those partners who already have the maps in their states. One said, I would love for somebody to be able to produce a one-page document explaining the steps that a shop could take if they were to do safe storage that would protect them from liability issues. I don't feel confident in my legal aptitude to produce such a document. On the other hand, I know of organizations who have gone completely in the other direction in that I would consider to be way overboard in scaring people about liabilities. I think that's dangerous too. So it's a very interesting sort of balanced view, if you will, of while respecting all the regulatory aspects of it, also not being too scared about this, that it makes it impossible to actually do it. The other colleague said everybody wanted to be able to have their own process. So we worked together to create a document that could be like a good guidance, but didn't prescribe how it would be done. And we had an attorney look at it and give us some feedback. The next one. There are also some really interesting quotes and comments from colleagues and partners in states that didn't have the map just yet. Maybe they're thinking about it. So one said, we've got to make a Q&A sheet or something that we can give people to help them, give them some guidance on what's best practices about doing these sort of storage transfers. The other person said, if storage sites ask, well, then what to do? What do we do? I don't want to be like, I don't know. So even if I'm like, you can do it the way you want it, it'll be point of technical assistance. Originally, I was hoping that there was a process or an organization that knew all the legalities. I would recruit all these people that were interested and then host a Zoom session that somebody else could walk through all the, liabilities and legalities and behind it, but it doesn't really seem to be a thing. The next one. And so despite these concerns, and please correct us if you know of one, to date, we know of no such liability cases actually brought forward because of firearm storage map. But as I said, it's not as if we have formally evaluated all these in the entire nation. If you know of any case, please let us know. And there's little to no case law regarding temporary transfer of firearm storage during periods of personal crisis across different states. So I'm talking about the voluntary out-of-home storage here. A couple of states, Louisiana and Washington, to our knowledge, have actually just very recently, in the past couple of years, have attempted to address this. But again, if you know of other states, please let us know. The next one, Emmy. Thank you. So HB 260 in Louisiana reads as the following. No person shall have a cause of action against a federal firearms licensee operating lawfully in the state of Louisiana for any act or omission arising from a firearm hold agreement and resulting in personal injury or death of any natural person, including the return of any firearms to the individual firearm owner by a federal firearms licensee at the termination of the firearm hold agreement. The next one. And the Washington one reads, a dealer who provides a service of allowing a person to temporarily store a firearm on the dealer's premises in a storage locker, box, or container that is locked and not accessible to the dealer does not thereby create a special relationship for civil liability purposes between the dealer and the person who temporarily stores the firearm on the dealer's premises. The next one. So in the context of what I have just covered and this really rapidly moving field, there are some suggestions that we have for the sites and also for those who are in charge of regulating different aspects of this that we hope that will take place in the future. One is trying to standardize the process. Many storage locations have developed a standard process for intake of firearms for temporary storage and have a standard contract between the storage facility and the firearm owner. This is a good idea, perhaps, because it could include determining what, if anything, employees will ask the individuals about their reasons for storing firearms. They may not want to ask it, but it would be good to explicitly standardize that so people are very clear and on the same page. It could relate to determining how the site will return firearms after storage. So it's very clearly and explicitly outlined and worded so people are clear about it from day one. It could entail gathering the necessary information from the firearm owner, the things that really the storage supplier thinks is really important to gather. And then providing clear information to the owner about issues such as background check requirements, lengths of time that storage is limited if there's a cap, cost of storage, limit on the number of firearms if there is a cap on that, and things like that. and also ensuring, obviously, compliance with ATF guidelines. We think knowing the federal and state laws as they pertain to firearm storage are really important. There is tremendous variability across different states in terms of what they have on the books in terms of firearm storage laws. As I said, many states are also silent on this issue, and a couple of states have very explicitly actually addressed the FFL's rights and responsibility in this, as I just read. And I think understanding ATF requirements here is really critical. As many of you who are on this call know and have practiced, FFLs can take a firearm into inventory for temporary storage in the same way as other acquisitions. So the same process is used to return a firearm as a new purchase. Many of you are familiar with ATF Form 4473 and compliance with the next background checks. So some licensees also have storage lockers available where only the firearm owner can actually maintain a key. So in that case, technically, as you could appreciate, there is no transfer technically. And so that's really important. And law enforcement agencies also, they have their own processes for logging and storing firearms. So it's really important to be familiar with those as well. The next one, please. And so what about policy, practice, and programmatic recommendations? There are organizational policies and programs that we think are really important to pay attention to. And there are regulatory agencies and policymakers that also have responsibilities to clarify things a little bit better, we think. In terms of the organizational policies and programs, there are two issues that come up. One is that we think it would be a wonderful idea if colleagues and partners who offer safe storage, they really couch it and wrap it under the broader umbrella of suicide prevention. I think that would be, we think it would be a very powerful approach to do this. It's not just this particular aspect of storage that we're talking about, but broader suicide prevention. So training of their staff and people who work in terms of suicide prevention, we think it would be powerful. Using the space that they have in terms of flyers or other approaches, modalities for communication about suicide prevention is going to be really important. The second one is the expansion of technology. As Leslie just showed to you how to create a map. Right now, there are all these states and localities that have their own maps, or there are other states or counties or the sub-state level that they are thinking about creating their own map. But the reality is that they're not all connected to each other. There is no common thread or link that links all of these different maps together. We think it would be wonderful if in the future, many of us who are in this call or other sites or states that would like to create a map will be connected to each other. You know, how you, for example, you search for a COVID testing site or for particular drug or prescription drug Dropbox. You search it on Google Map, you see all these national networks connected to each other and you see it at the national level. So right now it's a little bit isolated. It would be great if they all could get connected to each other in the future using technology. There are also, we think, responsibilities or steps that regulatory agencies and policymakers can make to make this easier for everyone. One is clarifying regulatory processes and legal and liability concerns as they apply to voluntary temporary storage out of home storage. Many storage suppliers, as I just mentioned, are unsure about the proper process for offering this wonderful community good. So ATF or local or state agencies can clarify this by explaining whether background checks are needed, when they are needed, and all the elements around then the specifics around this particular practice of storage outside home. The second issue is space concerns. The reality is that, well, this does take space, and it will be important to think about how those space concerns are addressed. Limited physical space for providing storage is an issue, is a valid concern, an issue for storage sites. And law enforcement agencies typically, they provide storage in their evidence lockers, but also that's a very complicated process, and necessarily not all the storage suppliers can necessarily emulate that. And so it would be important to, whether it's like a safe deposit box or bigger community storage lockers, to really envision scenarios where, in terms of space and the logistics of actually keeping firearms, how this can be done in a smooth manner that's also efficient. And speaking of efficiency, my last comment is about cost. As you all appreciate, both on the firearm owner side and also on the supplier side, there are costs. So there are costs in terms of background checks, there are costs in terms of getting to the site, there are costs in terms of storing them, there are costs in terms of providing training for staff to be able to do it. As Leslie just mentioned, there is the maintenance cost. Do you want to hire somebody as an intern or student who will keep contact with the sites to make sure that they're also keeping it, they're still on the map and they would like to continue to stay on the map. So there are several multifaceted cost implications for this. So it would be really great to think about how we could remove the cost barriers or reduce the cost associated with this as a community good. So we promote awareness about it, encourage more colleagues and partners to get involved, and hopefully result in saving lives and preventing suicide. So with that, let me end the presentation, and Emmy, I suppose we're going to go into the Q&A session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have some time for, I put our emails here. I'll take this down in just a second. We have time for some questions if anyone has one. There was at least one question or comment already in the chat that I wanted to address while people were thinking about what else they want to ask. And it relates to something Ali was just talking about, which is this question of how to make this sustainable, as well as linking it across states. And want to acknowledge again that the making these maps is just providing a way to find locations. Ultimately, really the goal is to make out-of-home storage feasible for people to use. And so Jake Wiskerson from Walk the Talk America brought up the question of, could you just have this happen in Google? Like, could businesses just have an option to say that they provide storage in Google, so that when you're searching for locations, it would just come up as part of your Google search? I think that would be amazing. If anybody knows anyone at Google, I think that would be a great ask in terms of how, could that be added as something along with the with their storage hours and so forth, because it would certainly potentially make it easier to disseminate, as long as then you had the sort of outreach to people to allow them to do that. Let's see, Jake, I don't know if I can actually allow you to do audio on this format. So if you have a follow-up comment or question, if you could throw it in the chat, that'd be super. So, but I think it's a great question. And we did also hear from places across state lines, for example, there are differing policies. So for places, if you live right on the border, that going across the state line might actually be easier for you, but then that adds additional layers of complexity. And Jake does not know anyone at Google. Oh, how did you get the lock icon on there? I think that was probably from one of the icon options.
Yeah, if you search through the Google Map options for the different icons, there's like 12 that show up when you click it. But if you go to more icons, there's like, I think a couple hundred. There's lots of different options.
I also want to shout out to Katie Ellison and crew in Missouri who have published their maps since we spoke to them. Congratulations. And Katie also raised a question about what to do if the firearm owner can't pass the background check when they come back to get it. I think that's another really good question, an area of uncertainty in terms of what happens. And many places have a storage agreement for a certain length of time. So same thing, if the person just never comes back, what happens? And Paul, yes, 100%. I would say making the map is actually in many ways the easy part of the project. As long as you can find a organization that seems appears trustworthy to folks in terms of hosting it, and you have people who make the calls. As Leslie pointed out, the actual making the map is very easy. It's this larger question of the liability and the other issues that are very valid issues that have been raised. And I think that it's really, really exciting to see what Louisiana and Washington have done in terms of passing state legislation for some liability protection. I don't do legislative action really much in Colorado. It's not the area I work in, but I think it's a really promising space to be thinking about. How do we make it, again, easier for places to offer the storage? And I think some civil liability protection would probably go a long ways. Yeah. Other questions or comments from Ali and Leslie?
No, I mean, I echo exactly what you said, Emmy, and there are great comments from Paul, from Jake in the chat box. And I just echo and concur with everything you said, is that, you know, at the end of the day, policy change is going to be really critical for this. And so advocacy, for example, I don't know exactly details in Louisiana, but I do know in Washington, there have been FFLs and colleagues that have done advocacy for this to really protect in terms of civil liabilities. And so if that could serve as a model for other states, that would be very promising. But I completely echo your point that broad level, societal level, policy level, regulatory change is needed at some point.
I think from some other questions and comments, so if folks are not aware of the Armory project in Louisiana, Gayla True and team have taken a slightly different approach, which I think is really exciting. You know, they've had a much more significant time and financial investment in a smaller number of retailers in terms of really building up partnerships. And so their map has fewer locations, but probably locations that are actually much more engaged in the broader activities around education and so forth. To answer the question, I think there are other sites that are doing bits and pieces of that. I think everybody has a slightly different mix of how they're approaching this. And many states might have different programs that aren't necessarily coordinated through the same groups, but might have, for example, a gun shop project, but also a firearm storage map that may be modeled or managed differently, which gets to Ali's point about, which is why we need an evaluation of sort of what the best approaches are. And so thank you to Dr. O'Connor from NIMH for being here and pointing out that there are funding announcements coming up, and maybe this might be an opportunity to think about what is the best practice sort of way moving forward. I know that the Washington also has some training for FFLs through the Safer Home Project, which is separate from the map.
There's a question in the chat about people who might own their guns illegally. I think we talked about this in the previous webinar back in March. So if there are specific questions about different ways to provide storage, I think that is a good one to go back to reference. But just super quickly, I believe some locations offer storage lockers where it doesn't actually require a transfer of the firearm. So it's just the person goes to the retailer range that has this locker system. They get a key from the place. It's still in their, it's still like legally theirs, but they're storing it in a locker that only they have access to. So that could potentially be a way that storage is accessible for those people. But that's certainly a barrier of these types of programs.
Yeah, and the webinar that Leslie mentioned from March, we had one of our retailer partners on as well, who answered a lot of questions about how she at her shop handles some of these issues as well. And I just put the link to the toolkit in the chat, and I know there's some other links that people are putting up too, which is fantastic. So it's the kind of thing, that's why we felt like a Google group or some kind of shared space would be really helpful for folks. So we will get that up and running and then and see how it goes.
Yes, and you see in the chat box, my colleague, Dr. Jeff Song, just put the unlock training for retailers in Washington under Safer Homes, which is different from MAP, as Emmy mentioned, but it's another ongoing effort in Washington.
Oh, wonderful. All right, well, we will, as I said, we will post the link to this webinar as soon as we can get it processed and up, and please feel free to share it. The toolkit itself is out as well with links to all of the states that had maps. We will update it with the Missouri map as soon as we can, and look forward to staying in touch with you all as we sort out opportunities and ways to do this. And maybe we'll make ourselves obsolete if we can, if Google or someone else takes this on, and that would be fine. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Thank you to my co-presenters, and have a wonderful day and be well. Thanks.